The man I knew as my dad never existed. I don't know if this belongs here or not. This is almost the sort of thing that's so off and so evil that no one would actually believe me. My friends know most of the story, but not the really gory details, only the gist of it. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I'll be writing this as I remember the events, but I'll try to keep them in sequential order as best I can. Since my mother was pregnant with me, my father had control of our family's finances. All of the money that both he and my mother earned, he could use and swap between bank accounts as he pleased. Since 2013, though, we've been having some problems with money, something which we shouldn't have been because both of my parents' jobs paid over $100,000 a year before taxes. Yes, my brother and I both went to private schools, and we have a St. Bernard to feed, but nothing has changed, and we suddenly started having money troubles, seemingly for no reason. Fast forward to February of 2015, and my father had a heart attack. While he was in the hospital, my mom looked in his car to find a mountain of bills, which included final notices to the mortgage of the house. Our house was in collections with the bank. When I found out about this, the only thing I could think to do was to go outside with my dog, Bailey, because I knew that if we were kicked out of that house, I'd likely never see him again, as he would be returned to the breeder we bought him from. This marked the beginning of my father's downfall. The time between then and October is all just a blur. I can't remember a few instances of my mom and father fighting really loudly. At some point, my father ended up sleeping in the spare bedroom, which was next to mine. Since about halfway through August, he'd not been able to work. He was having horrible chest pains, which we now know were rapid heart attacks, and yet he refused to go to the hospital or to have us call an ambulance for him. On the first day of October 2015, the monster who was my father died. Now, from what I've told you already, you may be thinking, your dad didn't seem so bad. Why are you calling him a monster? Well, I'll tell you why. Now, just a warning, this may become a little bit hard to follow, as I currently got all the stories in my head at once, and I'm just going to type them in the order of which I found out about them. So here we go. Since 2003, my father had been having an affair with a woman from his work. This is made worse when you know that my brother was born in 2005. How do we find out about this, I hear you thinking? Well, my older sister, 24 at the time, was looking through his emails to find electronic bills for things like Foxtel, TV service provider, for those who don't know, the gas bill, and the electricity. While my sister was looking for these, she finds emails from this woman. If I need to, I'll call her B, saying that my father had given her an STD. Going further back, B was saying about how good my father was the previous night. Now, this woman knew that my father was married. She knew that he had children. How do we know this? My father was complaining about us to her through emails. This woman is also the reason why we started having money problems. My father had bought her a diamond ring and was promising that he would leave my mom and marry B in June of 2016. My mom was always asking my father if they could go to the cinema for their wedding anniversaries. My mom was always asking my father if they could go to the cinema for their wedding anniversaries or for my mom's birthday or even just for the hell of it. But he never did. Why? Because he had already seen all the movies with B. My father was almost never home. On weekends, he'd be going to a second job, as he was calling it, and on weekdays, he was working late. I'll give you one guess on what he was doing instead, or rather, who he was doing instead. He never did anything at all around the house, except maybe wash the dishes once a week. And living without him isn't much different. My mom, my brother, and I almost always go on holiday in September. And my mom had been saving up to do it in 2015 since 2013. And everything was booked. So we went. My sister was supervising him. My mom found bills for a dog feeding service from before any of his medical issues began biting him in his ass. Bills for those dates. Instead of staying home like he said he was paying someone else to feed Bailey and spending 2 weeks at B's house. After talking about my father's behavior with a psychiatrist, we've come to the conclusion that my father was a sociopath. He was pretending to be the kind, funny, caring person I thought he was my entire life. He didn't even really care about me. He didn't even care about himself enough to lose some goddamn weight, because if he had, he never would have had the heart attack. The last little bit, I don't know too many details about, as my mom hasn't told me about it in extreme detail, and I haven't even told my friends about this out of fear that I'll be judged for my father's actions. My father was a rapist. I don't know when, and I don't know who. This is all my mom has told me. And she's told me not to say anything to anyone who knows me, because I will more than likely be seen as a rapist too by the people who don't know the full story. Please don't judge me because of something my father did. He made his own decisions, and I can never do that to someone. But this, if nothing else, tells me that my dad was a lie. I know that some people will think I'm just doing this to get attention, but frankly, typing this out has helped me a lot. Thanks for reading. It means a lot. True ghost and sleep paralysis stories. I'll share a story that my father once told me. This happened in the 80s, just before I was born, actually. My dad used to work for a small construction company. The project they were working on was out in the boonies. One of my dad's co-workers was a young man who had recently moved to town, but didn't really have anywhere to stay. He asked the foreman if he could stay overnight at the work site, and at the same time he would be like a security guard. The boss agreed. This went on for a week, no problems. One day, everyone shows up to work as usual, and the young fellow is nowhere to be seen. They searched the construction site but could not find him. His truck was parked in his usual spot. His belongings and work tools were still there. Nobody knew where he went. Oh yeah, there was a whole debacle over his whereabouts. 3 days later, he was found wandering the side of the highway. He was so deranged that he had to be committed. My dad eventually got around to talking to the man's family, and they said he was traumatized by something so badly. They didn't go into depth, but they said that he had claimed to have seen a face come out of the wall and stare right at him. To this day, this story gives me goosebumps. Not sure what to make about it, but I thought I would share it here. Here are two stories that happened to me, both involving sleep paralysis. I've been experiencing sleep paralysis for a few years now. I remember the first time that it happened to me. My brother and his wife went for a vacation overseas and had asked me to house sit for them while they were away. I show up to their place in the late afternoon and unpack all my stuff. The night before, I was having trouble sleeping and feeling just really ill for some reason. I had a small snack and decided to take a nap in the guest bedroom. It didn't take very long for me to doze off after my head hit the pillow. That's when it began. I opened my eyes and I could see the ceiling. Everything was orange from the setting sun beaming through the window. That's when I felt an immense pressure on my chest, my neck and my face, as if something were crushing me. I felt the most horrible terror I had felt in my life. I could hear my heart pounding. I tried to move, but I was unable to. I tried to scream, but I just wasn't able to. That's when I had the distinct impression that I wasn't alone. I felt as if someone was standing in the partially open closet next to the bed. I knew I wasn't able to move my head, but I was able to glance at the closet, and that's when the shadows in the closet got darker. That's when I thought I was going to die. Then I snapped out of it. I instantly sat up with a cold sweat dripping from my forehead. I frantically searched the room and the rest of the house, and I was totally alone. I was not able to go to sleep again that night because I was too afraid. It's happened nearly a dozen times since that first experience, each event stranger than the previous one. Sometimes I hear radio static and distorted voices. Sometimes I see shadows shifting and other oddities. Another sleep paralysis event I had, a nightmare or perhaps a vision. I found myself walking on a long stretch of shore next to a lake, sand edged by surrounding forest. I know this lake. I used to frequent this place with my family when I was younger. There were campgrounds and hiking trails surrounding the lake, but this time I was by myself on the great expanse of sand. It was autumn and the sun was low on the horizon, just peeking over the edge of the lake. Everything was basked in the orange glow of the setting sun. There was a bitter wind that was whipping sand around. I had to place my hands over my eyes to keep sand and other debris from getting in my eyes. At first, I thought that I was all alone on the lakeside beach, but I glanced behind me and found that I was in fact not alone. In the distance, there was a person who, from what I could see, was making a great effort to catch up with me. I stopped to let the person catch up, but something was not right. Despite the person apparently running towards me, he or she made no progress. The distance between us was not closing. I guess apprehension took over me, and I decided to start moving. And that's when I heard something. It was like an electronic mewling sound, like a bass note from a synthesizer. It was coming from behind me, from that person. I looked behind me and I really wish I hadn't. There was something different about this person now. It was emotion. It was like the person was having a violent, full-body spasm. The limbs flailed about wildly. The person bent at the spine in ways impossible without breaking it. The head twitched around in much of the same manner. And in an instant, the person was directly in front of me, and I fell backwards. I remember ash-colored skin, black eyes bubbling like char, and that's when I woke up. That's all for now. If anything else happens, I'll update.